Hey friends, I'm Scott Hanselman. A lot of you are having to adjust to making virtual presentations. Maybe you were going to speak at a conference, or you are going to be a teacher or an educator, and you are going from presenting in person to presenting virtually. A lot of times that means sharing your screen and putting together some kind of a talk for a big virtual conference. Let's talk about a couple of the things that might make you successful or some of the things that might cause you a little bit of trouble. So if we look at my system right now, let's just make me a little bit smaller. There we go. So here's my desktop. Let's start with that. If I want to share my desktop to you, there's a couple of things that I might want to do. First, this is 4K. I'm on a 4K monitor. You may not be on a 4K monitor, so I'm probably going to want to change my resolution. So I'm going to go and change that to 1080p. All right. I'm going to go and change my monitor to 1080p. All right. I'm also going to want to think about my scale. Is this the right scale? Is 100% the right scale? Is 125% the right scale? It all depends on you and your system. But you want to make sure that things are visible. Who is your audience? Is your audience another person on a computer with a 1080p high definition screen? Maybe the appropriate resolution for what you're doing is 720p. If you did that, you'd be rest assured that if someone were sharing, if you were sharing your screen to someone on a small Android device or tablet or an older phone, they would be able to see everything. Next thing that's worth pointing out here is I've got a lot of crap on my desktop. This is a lot of stuff that doesn't really look nice. So I could either move it to another monitor, or I could do a little trick here in Windows and say right-click, show desktop icons, and I can just disappear them. They're still there. I'm just hiding them. Okay? So that's a thing. The next thing we might want to point out is over here, the time. You can actually see over here the time that I'm recording this video. If you want your content to be evergreen, you might want to go to the start menu and say system icons. Turn system icons on or off, and you might want to turn off the clock. Next thing worth pointing out is all these icons down here. I don't mind them. Some people don't like them. You might consider hiding the toolbar. Okay, so you can basically lock the taskbar, go to taskbar settings, and then say automatically hide the taskbar. Gives you a nice clean workspace. And then, of course, if you move your mouse down here, it comes back up. Really up to you, but something to think about. I don't know if this is the desktop background that I think is appropriate. It's a little bit, I don't know, a little bit retro. Maybe I want to go with something a little bit more relaxed. Point is, know what's going on your screen, because that is, in fact, what you are presenting to folks. There we go. So at this point, I could potentially go into something like, I'll use Visual Studio Code and present. Now, if I'm using Visual Studio Code or presenting something else, again, everyone's different. Not everyone's a coder. Is this the right size for the code that I'm going to show? Let me bring up some code that I work on a regular basis. The code for my podcast. I think this is a little bit small, so I can use Control Plus and pick a good size. I tend to pick larger sizes. I tend to be as empathetic as I possibly can for the user, for the customer, for you, the viewer. So I think that this is decent, but I also have to be aware of where I am on the screen. If I'm using OBS, the Open Broadcasters Studio, or if I'm using Camtasia, I have the ability to pick myself up when I'm editing and moving my video around and make sure that things are visible. Totally up to you. Also, some people don't like picture-in-picture. They might want to move themselves off the screen entirely. Up to you, but you want to be intentional. I think the number one tip that I can give you for putting together your own virtual conference or any kind of virtual presentation is to be as conscious as possible. What's on the screen and what are you presenting to your viewers? For example, I might want to have my name or my Twitter at the bottom. Again, I'm just using Open Broadcasting software, and I'm going to include a link to that software in the description, as well as details on my blog and how I'm sharing my screen like this. The other thing I like to think about is when I select my text, if I'm going to be selecting or pointing at the text, is that low contrast or high contrast? Is this a theme that is appropriate for people? Another thing that I'm a big fan of is this thing called Zoom It. It's actually running down here in my tray. Where is Zoom It? It's zoomit.exe, not to be confused with Zoom. This is Zoom It. And Zoom It is really great because it allows me to draw on the screen. I can also hold down Control and Shift, and I can click and then drag away. I can hit G for green or Y for yellow, and I can annotate the screen. And then if I hit Escape, it goes away. I really like Zoom It. I hit Control 1, I move around, circle what I want, point to it, then hit Escape, and I go away. That makes for, I think, a very interactive and a very clean presentation, a very professional presentation. And using the open broadcasting software, I have been able to put together this little video in just about 5 or 10 minutes. In fact, you can see me right here. If we look at my desktop, and this software allows me to create scenes showing what appears on the screen. And you can set these scenes up and put hotkeys on them and get yourself really nicely set up very, very quickly. So I'm going to include notes for how to do that in the at the bottom. But this is some basic ideas on how to put together a virtual presentation, record it pretty easily. And again, I want to point out that this entire talk was done with zero editing using OBS, Zoom It, and I recorded it right here for YouTube like that. Thanks so much, and please subscribe to my channel.